All right, so just wanted to get on here today and just kind of talk about just some thoughts that I've had this morning. So over the last few days and even like yesterday, I did like a deep dive into learning about history. I talked about this before, but like I was watching documentaries about like what's happening in Africa and like all the pretty much the exploitation of other countries and how they came to be, like in the conditions that they're in. But then like also yesterday I bought this book on world history, and which led me into like learning about the basis of civilization, like early civilizations or before the civilizations, like the tribal, era, right around the ice age, and just learning like about the different human species and how we came to be. And so like I've taken like a huge interest so far into like learning these things, and just learning about like just the basis of what value was to us or is to us as human beings. And so like this morning, I just started like having some thoughts about like the resources and sacrifices and like what society, what the balance or like or just some of the aspects around like societal needs and community needs, and then like leadership, what the needs of leadership are. And like it had me thinking about like, okay, so as far as like the way society goes, the way human beings go, like I think on average, a lot of people really don't know what they're asking for, right? And the reason why I say this is because like there are a lot of people that, especially like in this country, that want world peace and they want equal rights and things like that. We see what's happening in other countries, how other places are going through just horrific, situations right now, and us on the other side, we're even though like yes, our economy is going down, and there's a lot of people who are in very compromising positions, like they don't have the jobs anymore. Everything is on the rise as far as costs, and things are becoming scarce. Winter is like right around the corner, literally, and so I understand like the economy is shifting, and there's a lot more people that are in worse situations than before. But at the same time, though, like as a society, we are still well off. We are still well to do, and we are in a considerably better environment, in situation than a lot of other people in this world. And so, like, I don't know, like you hear a lot of like the arguments that we should have world peace, we should have universal health care and equal rights and all this other stuff. And it's true, I want that just as much as everybody else. But when you actually start to think about it and you start thinking about the wants and needs of each individual and like the mindset of people, it's really easier said than done, right? And a lot of people don't realize that in order to accomplish world peace, you're going to have to change what you value, right? You're going to have to try to start, changing the way you think. And it starts with the resources that you have at your disposal, and I was thinking like, let's say like hypothetically, like, everybody's in agreement that we want world peace and we want the wars and stuff to stop. Okay. So in order to get that accomplished, one of the things that will have to happen is that the economy in these other places, these war torn places, they're going to have to be reconstructed, right? They're going to have to be rebuilt and rehabilitated. That's going to require resources, right? And so the resources, it's like energy, right? Like it's not destroyed, they're just shifted from one place to another. And so like in order to shift these resources to other places, it will have to be taken from other places, right? If you catch my drift. So like sacrifices are going to have to be made. I'm not talking about human sacrifices, but I'm talking about like the comforts that us, like, and not just America, but like any other thriving places, like, there are some things that part of the deal would be, okay, well, in order for us to rebuild these places, we're going to have to shift the resources over here, which means that the jobs will have to be cut somewhere else, which means that cash flow will have to be cut, somewhere else. Maybe, you won't have as quality of devices or imported goods or something like that. Maybe there's certain bags or purses, or makeup or vehicles or whatever, like some things will have to come to a halt, or they will have to be less available because now the resources will have to be shifted over there. Now, on the one hand, it's just like, okay, yes, so this is the path to world peace, right? It's going to be putting people in a better situation. If they're in a better environment and, and the land is rehabilitated and, they start developing crops and things like that and resources for themselves, education gets better, health gets better, all of that stuff, So this is the plan that we have, the initiative that we have to achieve world peace. But again, like in the midst of that, in order to get this accomplished, resources will have to be taken. And so, like, on the other hand, the people that have these resources, like, for example, America, like, most people will look at that plan and they will not get behind it because they don't like the part where they're going to have to let go of some things, right? And that's the reality of the situation today. Now, granted, of course, like, the 1% or, the people that's in high places, like, of course, there's a level of, not even a level, but of course, like, there is control, that's in here. Like, of course, they got power. They got the resources, they got control, and that mentality really comes from the top down, like, if you really think about it. So, like, I understand that there are people in high places that they have this same mentality too, where they don't want to give up their piece of the pie in order to achieve world peace. But, like, the other part is, again, that mentality comes from the top down. And so, like, the citizens, the normal, average, everyday citizens, like, because they're so accustomed to a certain lifestyle, like, they're not going to want to give up on that stuff. Like, and again, the deal is it'll be a better world for everybody across the board, So, but a lot of people, they can't see they can't see the vision. They can't see, like, the end goal of, like, what the true value is that everybody claims that they want, which is world peace. And they're not willing to make the sacrifices to get there, And I don't know. I feel like that's a big thing that I think a lot of people need to keep in mind is that that's really the way, like, human psychology works, and that's really how leadership works too, because, like, I'm learning, like, as you climb up, and you become responsible for people, like your tribe or your empire or whoever, like, these are some of the decisions that you are going to be faced with. And, as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a founder, or even just as a head of your own household, you're going to have to step into a role where you will have to be the bad guy sometimes and make some very, very hard decisions on where things are going to go, or you're going to have to be the opposition fighting the bad guys who is, trying to take on this initiative. And it's hard, it really, really is hard. The other thing about it is too, like, it's not, to say that I'm pointing the finger at anybody and saying that this is the way you should think and that, all of us are selfish and hoarders, and low-key we are, even myself. So, it's not to say that I'm above anybody. I'm in this as well. But, like, I really do think that collectively, like, situations like this where we're going through, like, a recession and the job market is collapsing and even, like, the dollar itself is shaky a little bit. I think this is a time where, like, us will have to really start coming to terms with what we truly value, and what it will take for us to maintain that, or even get that accomplished, like, just as an example, like, as far as like what you truly value, like, say if you're accustomed to riding Mercedes-Benz and BMWs, right? You probably didn't start off that way, but you put the work in for you to get there, and you might have started, who knows? But either way, that's the current lifestyle that you had, and now, because the resources are scarce and because they're being shifted, and it could be for a number of reasons. In order for you in order for the greater good, to be in a better place, the part of the sacrifice that you have to make is now you should get the Ford, you should get the Ford vehicle, and which is going to be considerably lower, but again, it's still a resource, it's still something that can get the job done. It can still get you where you need to go and do all the things that, as far as, like, the basis of what a vehicle does, it still does everything that the BMW does. It's just less, but there are some people, they will fight you tooth and nail because they feel like they deserve the BMW over the Ford, even though it still does the same exact thing. And I don't know, like, I feel like in a way that's kind of where some people are. Like, again, it may not be as far as, like, somebody getting a job loss, but maybe, you might not be able to get your hair and nails done, or maybe you might not be able to get that new iPhone, or something like that. Or maybe the iPhones, like how it is today, they're not so innovative, as they used to be. And these are just, like, random examples that I'm throwing out, but it's just like, the whole point is, like, the value and everything, it really starts in the mind. And I think there's just, like, a lot of people, like, and this is just even from my own career standpoint, there are a lot of people that don't like change. And they don't like having to like give up things, you know. And the thing about it is the government knows this. Like the people in high places that are in charge of, you know, how the resources are divvied up, they know this, you know. And it's like, you know, a lot of the comforts again that we have, especially as Americans, like having a car, like right now, like I can complain that I can complain right now about like social media and what's going on, you know, as far as like the 50-50 argument and I don't know, like TikTok being taken away and stuff. Like these are things that we complain about, but you know, it's just like I don't know, like these are the things that we kind of complain about, but it's just like, you know, we've kind of got accustomed to being this way, like, you know, like, and I just feel like there's a lot of things that we're just like really focused on that I don't think is really of true value. But you know, again, I'm also in a spot where like I'm trying to process these things because like I'm also seeing that there's a fine line between like actually making decisions because it's of the greater good versus making decisions and kind of becoming a dictator, you know, in a sense. Because I don't know, like, again, once you're in leadership, you have to be that guy and you have to like make decisions on like what's allowed and what's not allowed. And I don't know, it's kind of complex. I think my mind is kind of like drawing a blank and it's like, you know, being a little bit combative right now. But like between all of that, I was also like, I came across this other story. His name was Lee Kuan. I can't remember the last name, but it was Lee Kuan something. But basically, he was the prime minister of Singapore, and like, it's very brief because I only like looked him up through Google and stuff, so I don't know like the full in-depth history. But like, apparently, this guy he pretty much turned the economy around. So you know, Singapore was very poor, you know, and then in a short amount of time, he was able to change the economy around and basically automate the economy from like a very functional, like societal, you know, functional standpoint. Like he was able to systematize it and automate it and bring up the dollar and bring up the economy. And it's pretty interesting because like I don't know if there was blood involved in this, but like the whole narrative that I'm seeing is that he did it through strict order, like very, very strict order. So like as far as like what was being consumed, like with media and stuff like that, it was very, very strict. Politics, you know, were strict. Anybody that opposed them, he provided like libel judgments, which is basically suing them, like, and giving them very hefty, you know, fines, which put people in financial ruin. And this was the way that a lot of it was really just influence. Like he just, you know, put stoppers and blockers on anything that was of influence, politics, media, even just like social gatherings, you know, even that was like monitored. You know, they had designated times and areas where people can socialize and even where people can unionize and protest, you know, that had to be carried out in a very specific approved way. And a lot of people were criticizing about him, but like, you know, at the same breath though, like as far as results, you know, come to show, it did bring the economy up, you know, and I think it was really because he had to put people in a position to really be dead set focused on what value really is. And I don't know if everybody over there, like, you know, the economy is on the same page about what value is, but like he knew and he made sure that, you know, the people around him that was managing everything were all on the same page. And I don't know, like I feel like those are like some, you know, an extreme case, but like, you know, as a society, I think that's what that's something that a lot of people need to keep in mind. It's, again, especially people who are leaders, you know, like if you're a founder, if you're a CEO, you know, especially working with disruptive technology like AI and stuff like that, like you really have to come to terms and think about what it is that you truly value. How far are you willing to go to invest in that and to protect that, you know, and are you willing to be the bad guy? Because at some point you're going to have to be the one that enforces this, or you're going to have to be the one that fights this, you know. And to close off, I do also want to like touch on like, there's this video game that I was also thinking about, like, you know, as I was thinking about all of this, it's called Spore. And Spore is like a video game that was made by Maxis. And I'll have to do some research about this company too, because actually I'm very much a fan of them. I don't believe they're a company anymore. I believe they got acquired by EA and then eventually they might have dismantled or shut down or whatever. I don't know. But like either way, Maxis is the original developers of The Sims, the popular game The Sims. But they had this other game called Spore. And it was almost kind of sort of like Sims in a way, but not really. But it's more centered around evolution. And in particular, like human evolution, but it wasn't like humans, you know. But it's that's one of my favorite games, like, you know, and it just had me think about like, even from that game, like it teaches you very, very early on, like at the start of the game when you start off as a microorganism, that the value and the whole rules, of survival and being able to evolve, the rules were very, very bare bones and very clear cut. So like as a microorganism, the whole thing is to survive, right? And so like if you're a carnivore, you it's really about consumption. And so like if you're a carnivore, you have to kill or be killed. If you're a herbivore, you're gonna have to salvage or look out for the bad guys, right? And that's really what the whole object is. The game is how long can you survive in a pool of quote unquote sharks, predators basically. And so like if, as the longer you stay alive, the skills that you build and all the knowledge and stuff that you build allows you to acquire certain traits. And, based on that, you get to pick out like what type of traits you have. And it's really cool because like certain body parts, like if you get certain tails or arms or limbs or things like that, like it affects like how agile you are, how your strength is and things like that. It's really, really cool. But like, that's the whole object of it, it's, and you learn from a very, very like fundamental early standpoint that you have to pick and choose what your value is and just be dead set, on that. And then just like, if you get past all of that, eventually you emerge from the water. And then the next phase of survival is you finding your tribe, establishing, I wouldn't say settlement, but you're finding your tribe really. And then your tribe can also mean finding your allies. But in the midst of you finding your allies, you also have to watch out for your foes. And so the whole basis of communication, like if you're like dancing, if you're, communicating through speech, it's and depending on the nature of the relationship, it can go good or it can go bad. What you communicate can be received well, or it might be rejected. And I don't know, like I think about like stuff like that because it's again like it's very like primal the way we operate. And I don't know, like I feel like when you're in leadership, it is also a kind of a slippery slope. And this is why like you see like a lot of people in these high places, they come off very monotone, very like you can't read them, you don't know where their stance is. I even saw like a video on Instagram, was like a little clip of like the White House dinner with Donald Trump, and you can see like all of the CEOs and like these important people that really make all these decisions about the economy. And it's just like, these people every day are in a position to where they not control, but they impact the lives of many different people, many different primal beings, and the thing about it is, and this is the part that's a little concerning for me, but like, again, if you become successful and the more successful that you become, like you're going to be put in a very compromising position, and you have to be very focused on what you value, because like you'll have to be the bad guy, sometimes again. And then like, but the thing about it is, because you're dealing with primal human beings, you have to be mindful that your decisions also come with a level of consequences. And, it's, you see it like a lot more in like older times, like you think about like the French Revolution and stuff like that. But if you make enough people angry, if you take too much from them and the results are not fast enough, or the results are not satisfying enough, this is when problems start coming in, and this is when people become very angry. And when there's a lack of resources, then that's when things become extreme, and then blood literally starts coming into play. And if you think about it, us as primal beings, when we were hunter gatherers, it's the same. Like if you're hungry, usually when you're hungry, you can't really see past anything else. You ain't thinking about world peace or anything like that. You're just thinking about just survival. And so like, I don't know, like the analogy I guess I can kind of put to that is like, you hear stories about festivals or like concerts and stuff where like there's a lot of people in one place, and this is where crowd control comes into play, where like there's a lot of people in one place, and because something happens in one particular spot, it can cause a chain reaction, and then next thing you know, it gets compressed, there's a trampling or something, and people can literally lose their lives like so quickly because emotions, the physical aspect is changing, and then like emotions run high, and then next thing you know, survival kicks in, and then like, nobody is seeing like what's for the greater good. They're just really just focused on what's right in front of them, and then there's the conflict of interest, right? Because then it's no longer about, while it is about survival, everybody has their own means of just thinking about themselves, and then like conflict of interest comes into play, and then that's when things get really, really ugly, so I don't know, like it's again like when you're in terms of leadership, or even just like in terms of you just being like a more empathetic, sympathetic person, and really just elevating yourself, like these are things that you could become a light into, or at least I'm becoming a light into, that like you have to be mindful of the greater good, and you have to be like, you have to constantly work on your balance, between that. Like I said before, there is a very fine line between like doing what's best and being a dictator, and so like, it's again, it's a slippery slope, I would say like for people that's like Donald Trump or even like Kim Jong-un or whoever, like all these places, like all these people, like they are kind of in the hot seat, and it's not to empathize with any of them, but I can just, now I'm starting to understand that like when you're in a place of leadership, like there is a risk that comes along, with that. And, if you don't deliver, people will literally want your head on a spike, like, I mean, it is a choice of life and death, at the end of the day. And so like, yeah, I don't know. I think like where the economy is going and where things are going, like, I hope things end up getting better. But it does concern me, but, I'm, again, this is just life, and this is where, if things go, this is where it goes. But it's like, I do think that with the economy being strained, there's going to be a lot of people who will have to start making some hard decisions, and it's going to be interesting to see like where people will start to collectively think value is, and that's my hope. Like my hope is that we can at least come to a collective thought, a collective decision on where value is. But at the same time, though, again, in order to get that accomplished, we're going to have to make sacrifices. We're going to have to be comfortable in making those sacrifices, and be comfortable that the sacrifices doesn't take away from our basic necessities. Because if it does start to take away from our basic, necessities of, our needs of survival, if it doesn't cover that, it can take a turn for the worse, and that's when we start to really turn on each other. And, that's when wars start to happen, like real wars, civil wars, and I don't know, like, again, like I just hope that at some point this is where things are going, but yeah, I guess that's my little spiel, for today. Really just, again, think about what is it that you're willing to give up? Because from what I see and what I've seen just throughout time, a lot of people say that they want peace and they want to live in a better world, and, they want these things to stop. But again, like, how far are you willing to go? Are you willing to give up some of your comforts in order to get that accomplished? Like, are you willing to make the sacrifices in order to get that accomplished? And, I think a lot of people, they're not willing to, because a lot of it's still in the mind, but sometimes you might have to be put in like strenuous situations for you to really come to terms, with that and find out your answer. So yeah, so I guess that's all I really wanted to get on here and talk about. So until next time.